The Panthers have cut their roster down to 53 men, and as of right now, they have 7 wide receivers. Will that be the case on Wednesday? We'll react to the Panthers' initial 53-man roster and try to think of what players they may try to get up on the waiver wire right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And of course, we are live right now on YouTube, like I am after every Panthers regular season game and every time there's big breaking news like the Panthers announcing their initial 53-man roster like they did earlier today. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Wednesdays here on the show throughout the entirety of the regular season, I'll be answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for next week's edition of the weekly Wednesday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. And what time is it? It's time to break down the Panthers' initial 53-man roster. Keyword is initial. The roster is not finalized, will not be finalized. The Panthers are going to make waiver claims, are going to bring in new players. Guys who made the team today will not be on the team tomorrow, at least on the active 53-man roster. Maybe they get signed back to the practice squad or get added later on. There will be changes to this roster. It's going to look different by the time we get to next Friday, as the Panthers are going to be heading down to New Orleans to face off against the Saints in week 1. So understand that this is just what the roster looks like today, live here, Tuesday, August 27th at 5:45 p.m. This time tomorrow, guys who are on the team today will not be on the team tomorrow because the Panthers have the top waiver wire priority claim for the first 4 weeks of the season. And knowing that this is a team, there's a lot of questions in certain areas on this roster, they're going to be active and aggressive, rightfully so, in trying to make the best roster they can, considering the circumstances where there's only so much you can really do to improve your team at this point in time with the guys that are going to be available to you and the cap space limitations Panthers do have. But they're going to try their very best to make sure they can have this team be at its best. But of course, you're going to need guys like J.C. Horn, Bryce Young, all of the names that we've talked about all offseason long, all throughout the training camp, preseason, to stay healthy if this team is going to achieve their goals this season, whatever those goals may be for them and for you and for me. They probably vary. Obviously, we all want to see them do well, but as far as what the realistic goals are, we don't really know. But as far as starting off, before looking at everything that happened today, understand these two things that are very important for people trying to figure out what exactly has happened today. Players were either released or waived. A player that was released is a veteran NFL player with careers of 4 years or longer. Those guys are released. They are not subject to waivers. They are free agents immediately, and they can negotiate and sign with any interested team, including the Carolina Panthers and the other 31 teams. So if they were released, they were a vet. Guys that were waived have played fewer than 4 years and are not immediately released. Instead, they're placed on the waiver wire, allowing the other 31 teams to place a waiver claim on said player. Waiver order, like the first round of the NFL draft, is in reverse order of the previous year standings, meaning the Carolina Panthers have the top priority to be able to get whoever they want that is currently on the waiver wire. Should a player go unclaimed on the waiver system, he would then become a free agent and would be able to be signed and negotiate wherever they would like to go. So understand that. Looking at, though, the roster here in Carolina, we'll start off with the offense, and wide receiver was the spot I was really curious to see how it was going to shake out. When I recorded yesterday's show, it was right around the same time, maybe during Dave Canales' press conference, where he talked about wide receiver being a strength, and I found that to be interesting as I see two guys that you can depend on and a bunch of question marks as far as offensively what guys like Jonathan Mingo, Xavier Legette are going to provide this season. It's possible that they are pluses, but right now, big old question mark behind both of those guys right now and trying to figure out what their impact may be this season in Carolina. Either way, Canales said the Panthers could see themselves keeping 7 wide receivers, or they could see themselves keeping 4 and then going out and placing waiver priority claims on 2 other guys and bringing them in on Wednesday. Right now, they've gone with the first option, and that's keeping 7. Adam Thielen, Deontay Johnson, Jonathan Mingo, Xavier Legette, Amir Smith-Marset, David Moore, Jalen Coker. Those are the 7 guys that are right now here in Carolina. Terrace Marshall Jr., who they tried to trade. That did not happen. They have waived him, Sam Pinckney, and Mike Strawn. No surprises there with those 3 being waived. I was no surprise that they actually did keep 7. Now, the fact that Canales said that they would do that yesterday maybe should make it not a surprise. But still, I look at this wide receiver core. I see Adam Thielen, someone that Bryce Young leaned on heavily last year and someone he's going to lean on again, and Deontay Johnson as the 2 known factors, known commodities, rather. Everybody else, I just don't know. I really don't have that much confidence currently in the rest of that group, which made me think that Thielen, Johnson, Bingo, Legette, those guys were clearly going to be on the team. Maybe the Panthers could have gone that route instead and then gone out in the waiver wire to bring somebody else in who could help them out this season. Instead, they've kept 7. So TMJ being gone, that's not surprising. Jalen Coker, I had talked about in the previous days how I felt like he was not going to make the team, but then thought more about just the situation within the wide receiver room and also the fact that if he did go to the waiver wire, it was unlikely the Panthers were going to be able to take him back here on the practice squad based off of just how big of his market was back during the draft. And when he went undrafted, a lot of teams wanted him. Carolina, fortunately, were able to get him. I don't think they were going to get him back had they cut him and put him on the waiver wire. Now they have him as a guy that they're probably just going to basically redshirt. As I don't imagine he's going to be active that often, at least early on this season, but he's a guy that they want to develop, and he's now here to stay, at least for this season. I still expect him to be aggressive when trying to claim a wide receiver. I see 2, and everyone else, like Amir Smith-Marset, David Moore, both those guys can be return men. And looking at some of the other guys that are on this roster, do they really need 4 players that are capable of being returners? Smith-Marset is going to be the primary punt returner. You look at Raheem Blackshear, who's running back. He's going to be primary kickoff returner. David Moore, does he need to be on this roster? I don't know. And same thing with Smith-Marset. He had an injury. Seems like he's fine right now for the team to have him. I could see one of those 2 guys being expendable if the Panthers want to go address another position, or if they want to bring in a different wide receiver who is available to them via waivers. Tight end, another spot that I felt like was going to be pretty straightforward. Tommy Trimble, Tavion Sanders, Ian Thomas, and I thought it was going to be Jordan Matthews after he had a really strong preseason, was great against the Patriots. It's awesome getting a touchdown in that opening drive from Bryce Young against the Bills on Saturday afternoon. Wasn't as good against the Jets, but had a strong preseason and training camp. Considering the injuries to Tommy Trimble and Ian Thomas, the Panthers staff got a lot of time to evaluate him and the rookie Jatavion Sanders out of Texas. I felt like he was going to make the team, and he is not on the team. They released him, Jacob Hollister, and Jesper Horstat. Now, according to all the reports I've seen out there, the Panthers' intention is still to bring back Jordan Matthews on the practice squad. Now, here's the thing. He's released. He's a vet. He has to decide himself whether he wants to stay here in Carolina or if he wants to go see what his market is outside of Carolina. And I think that would be a wise thing to do, of course, but he spent this entire offseason with this team. Probably makes the most sense to remain here, and the team really would like for him as far as his locker room presence, knows the scheme. And I think he's come a long way as far as becoming a tight end after playing wide receiver to start off his career in the NFL. So they want to bring him back on the practice squad. I was surprised to see that he did not make the team, which probably means that they are feeling pretty good about Ian Thomas. And I know y'all hate that Ian Thomas is still on this team. This coaching staff likes him. The last coaching staff liked him too, and the one before that, and the one before that. And I'm guessing if this coaching staff is to leave at any point in the near future or in a couple years, and Ian Thomas is still here, the next coaching staff will like him too. That's why I call him the survivor. He's a solid run blocker. He's never going to be great in the pass game or even just average in the pass game. And it's unfortunate. We saw those first 2 years, especially his rookie year when Greg Olsen was injured, it looked like he could be the future at the position. Now we're sitting here in 2024, and we know who Ian Thomas is, and they know who Ian Thomas is, and they also know that there weren't a lot of other options out there on the roster right now that they could trust like they could with Ian Thomas, I suppose. Jordan Matthews, probably going to still be a Carolina Panther. Tommy Tremble is always going to be on the team. JT Sanders, you should be happy about the fact that Thomas has been banged up to where Sanders has gotten more reps and he has looked pretty good to where possibly once the season begins, it's going to be Tremble and Sanders more than it's going to be Ian Thomas. But you need somebody on run blocking downs. If you want to have 2 tight ends, probably makes most sense to Tommy Tremble and Ian Thomas to be those guys and not JT Sanders, who still has a little bit of a ways to go as a run blocker, and then Jordan Matthews, who's a guy who's still transitioning into being a tight end. Now, he's been a tight end for a while. I don't know if he's going to be a better blocker than Ian Thomas. It is what it is. I'm not trying to sit here and defend it. I just know people are going to be pissed because people are always mad about something with this team, and there is no joy a lot of times until they start winning again. Offensive line, they kept 10. I did not see them keeping 10 offensive linemen. Ike Ekwonu, Damian Lewis, Austin Corbett, Robert Hunt, Taylor Moton. That is your starters from left to right. Brady Christensen, clearly the number 6 guy on the roster. Josh Nyman, who came off a pup last week. He's a swing tackle here this season. Cade Mays, he's still on the team after suffering a AC sprain in his shoulder. He's good to go right now. Chandler Zavala, did not think he was going to make the team going into training camp after watching how he performed and how really Ricky Lee performed, a guy who made the team last year as an undrafted free agent out of A&T rather, and did not play well. He didn't play well again this preseason. We didn't play well this preseason. Now he's no longer on the team. Well, he didn't make the team. Chandler Zavala, he did play well, looking at just how he was in there with the ones during training camp. And I wondered if this is a regular season game, would they really have him at left guard? It probably would actually be Brady Christensen. I still feel that way. Either way, he got those opportunities with the ones throughout training camp when he had to fill in for Damian Lewis. And then when they played in that game on Saturday at Buffalo, when the starters came out, he also came out, and that solidified it for me that he was going to make the team. The surprise to me when it comes to offensive line is that Andrew Rame, the center, the UDFA out of Oklahoma, is on the 53 for now. I did not see that one coming. He did fill in on Saturday as a starter for Austin Corbett, and I had mentioned Dave Canales already came out and said the stars are going to play. Had he known that Austin Corbett, and maybe he did know Austin Corbett was not going to play and that Damian Lewis wasn't going to play, had he maybe known that both those guys weren't going to play, would he have been committed to having Bryce Young out there behind 2 backups in Zavala and Rame? Maybe, maybe not. But Rame went out there and actually played pretty well. He stayed in the game after the opening drive, and he also went in at a point in time during joint practice with the Jets as like their 3rd string left guard with the ones and was holding his own. I did not see much fall off or issues there on that left side without Lewis and with Zavala with the hamstring that afternoon, or that morning rather. Andrew Rame earned a spot on the roster for now. We'll see whether he sticks around. I do like the idea of a true center being on the roster as a developmental guy. I've talked about the Panthers have not drafted one since they drafted Ryan Khalil all those years ago. Now having a developmental center, potentially Andrew Rame, where Austin Corbett, like possibly his last year in Carolina, could work out for them down the road. So he's on the team. They waived Jack Anderson, Mason Brooks, Jeremiah Crawford, Ricky Lee. Those guys have been waived. They waived injured Tyler Smith, and then they release Ike Butker, I believe is his last name. Don't know how to pronounce it, but the 10 offensive linemen, possibly they'll be down to 9 after a day. We'll see. Running back, pretty straightforward. Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders, and those guys are going to be on team. Raheem Blackshear, even though we have not seen him this preseason, and training camp also is pretty limited, he is still on the roster as the primary kick returner. They waived Jaden Sheridan for a second time. They released Mike Boone, and then reserve non-football injury list Jonathan Brooks. He is officially out for the first 4 weeks of the season. Dave Canales said a couple weeks ago they were targeting week 3, week 4. He would not rule out week 1. I never really bought into that. Now we know he's definitely not going to be ready for week 1, week 2, week 3, or week 4. When will Jonathan Brooks be ready? I don't know. You're fair to ask why the Panthers spent a 2nd-round pick on a player who may not help them this season, but they're looking towards the future like they did with a lot of the picks they made in 2024, which is a departure from what we've seen in the past, which I suppose is a positive considering it was always win now, just to go 5-11, 5-12, and last year we saw 2-15. So I do like what they did in the draft this year by thinking ahead and bringing in some players who I do like in the future, like a Jonathan Brooks. Mike Boone is the surprise here offensively. From the conversation I had, Mike Boone was going to be on the team and he was going to make the 53. The Panthers decided that he's not on the 53, but the expectation, though, is they're going to re-sign him. Like with Jordan Matthews, he is released. He can negotiate with other teams, decide whether he wants to stay in Carolina. Would probably make the most sense to stick with the team that you've been with all off season long. And I expect that he'll be back on the roster. That has also been all the talk. So sounds like at some point in time, because he's a vested veteran, they didn't want to guarantee his salary. Probably the same thing with Jordan Matthews. They'll wait until after week 1, see how things play out, then bring him back at the kind of salary and cap hit that works better for the team this year. So Mike Boone, who ran hard in the preseason, impressed his team throughout training camp, he'll be back, just not just yet, probably. Quarterback really just came down to whether they're going to keep Jack Plummer and waste a roster spot or not, and he decided no, they're not going to waste a roster spot. Say that fast a million times. Jack Plummer was waived, and if he clears through waivers, the Panthers are going to sign him to the practice squad, which is the right thing to do. I do not have a problem with Jack Plummer being a developmental quarterback here on the practice squad. They have worked with him since April all the way through the preseason. He improved week to week, was terrible week 1 with little help from his receivers and offensive line, was better week 2, still not impressive. And then last week was really good, actually graded out higher than Bryce Young. Now, he played the majority of the game. Bryce played one series, not really apples to apples comparison, but still positive considering he looked unplayable the first 2 weeks of the preseason. That speaks to his ability to be coached and develop, and also the development that we've seen in the past from Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith. Dave Canales working those guys. Look what he did with Jack Plummer. Hopefully he can do that with Bryce Young. So Jack Plummer, subject to waivers. We'll see if the Panthers are able to claim or able to get him off of waivers out if he's able to pass through, and then they can have him as that developmental quarterback on the practice squad, or they're going to bring somebody else in. And I think they would rather, of course, have a guy that's been here all off season be in that spot. But TBD on how all that works out. Bryce Young, Andy Dalton, those are the two guys here, of course, at the quarterback spot. So some surprises on offense at running back, tight end, offensive line, wide receiver. And I'm really still interested to see, are they going to keep 7 wide receivers? Are they going to change things up? Or are they really sticking with Thielen, Johnson, Mingo, Leggett? Obviously, those guys aren't going anywhere. But I'm looking at Smith-Marset, David Moore. Jalen Coker's probably pretty safe too. It really comes down to Smith-Marset and David Moore. Do they bring somebody else in? Do they decide that they want to have both those guys? We'll see how that plays out over the course of, the next 18 hours. As noon on Wednesday is the deadline for teams that place a waiver claim. Then we'll find out probably around 2 o'clock later tomorrow afternoon who is on the team now, who the Panthers brought in, and who the corresponding moves are. All right, let's take a quick pause, come back here, take a look at the defense and some reactions to how that part of the roster shook out here in Carolina in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Football season is almost here, and really it's here this weekend. College is here next weekend, the NFL, but the best way to get to games this fall is with Gametime. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Gametime Picks curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Shout out to the 130 people with me on this Tuesday early evening as we're reacting to the Carolina Panthers initial 53-man roster ahead of the 2024 regular season. It is initial as this is not a finalized roster. The Panthers will put in waiver claims, and they will find out who those players are likely around 2:00 on Wednesday afternoon. And then they'll have to tell guys who they told today, sorry, you're no longer on the team. But I assume they're going to try to bring back as many of those guys as they possibly can as they fill out the practice squad. They can have up to, I believe, 17 players on the practice squad. Looking at the USA Today article I saw earlier. So, yeah, you're going to get the practice squad put together once they figure out who they're going to boot after getting whoever they really want on the waiver wire, which is a great spot for the team to be in. I know they didn't get the number 1 overall pick. Sucks that they didn't get it. And we've all been through that discussion plenty of times this offseason. Good thing is, though, right there, roster priority waiver wire, priority, blah, blah, blah. They're right there to get the guys that they want to try and help this team. Now, will they be able to bring in the guys of quality to help the team at certain spots? We'll see. Because I was looking at it today, and it's just so funny because there's a lot of times I look at this roster, the Panthers roster itself, like I didn't know who the hell Derek McClendon was and a lot of these dudes. And I'm looking at NFL.com right now and just looking at some of these rosters and trying to think, oh, who could potentially be somebody the Panthers want to go after? And I don't know who Brock Morgensen is, who played for the Dallas Cowboys and got cut. There's some guys I've heard of, but it's like, I'm looking at it, don't know who all those guys are, and we'll try to parse through it all. But getting to the defense, and I'm going to stop stalling here. Looking at the defense, where the roster's at, defensive line was also surprised that they kept 7 here. I thought they'd only keep 6. Derek Brown, Shai Tuttle, Ashawn Robinson. Obviously, those guys are in the roster. Nick Thurman back once again. LeBron Ray missed time because of an undisclosed illness, but he's still here. Jaden Cromedy made the roster, 6th-round pick out of Mississippi State. I was thinking that he was going to have trouble as he had an ankle injury. Maybe the Panthers would put him on IR and redshirt him for the season, at least for now. He's on the team. Then Jaden Peavy makes the team, not TJ Smith. That was a surprise to me. Going back and looking at the Pro Football Focus grades from Saturday, Peavy actually was the highest graded defensive lineman, or not even defensive lineman, defensive player, period, in that game against Buffalo, and was making some plays. I was thinking to myself, maybe I should pay more attention to Jaden Peavy. I was like, no, I won't do that. I already have my mindset on who's going to make the team, and I got it wrong. But whatever. The wave, Ulamu, Ale, Walter Palmore, and, of course, TJ Smith. He's been waived. So 7 of those guys, they waive injured Junior Aho. We'll see. This is another spot like offensive line, like wide receiver, where once they place those waiver claims and they get who they get, this could be where they decide, hey, Jaden Peavy, it's been fun, but you're no longer here. I think more likely, if it's not going to be him, it would be Jaden Cromedy being placed on IR and being able to return in 4 weeks with that ankle injury. And I think that's probably the most likely scenario if they want to be able to add somebody in. They only had 2 spots where they could place players on injured reserve and then already have them designated for return. They used that on Dane Jackson and on Sam Franklin Jr., 2 things we talked about on yesterday's show when projecting what the roster would look like initially here on this Tuesday afternoon. So that's a possibility for them. We'll see if that's how it works out. I just don't think they're going to keep 7. I even go back to July when we were doing the roster breakdowns and felt like this was a spot where they potentially could keep 6, because looking at outside linebacker and the injuries there, I didn't think the numbers were going to be very high for that spot, and that turned out to be the case. Jadeveon Clowney, DJ Johnson, Caleb Chason, Echo Leota, that's it. Those are the 4 outside linebackers right now. Currently the worst edge rushing group in the NFL. Not trying to be negative, it's just a fact. Look around the rest of the league and look at their edge rushing groups and look at this one. It's at the bottom, and I don't know how much better it's going to get. I know I'm the same guy who just said, I'm looking at NFL.com, I'm looking at these players, and I'm like, who the hell is this? And NFL.com also doesn't tell you whether they're released or waived. So I lean to my guy, or really defer to my guy, Mike Kay, who from the Charlotte Observer. He's going to have an article out there at charlotteobserver.com or whatever it's observer.com. I don't even know what the website is with the Observer. He's going to have a website talking about some guys he thinks would make sense for the Panthers to go claim. So I do encourage you to go check out his work there, as he seems to be more keyed in on who they may want. I just look around, and he feels the same way, as far as they're going to have a tough time anyways at this stage claiming someone who's going to come help them at the edge rusher spot. It's still possible they can go out there and sign somebody off the street who could help them. I just don't know if anyone on the waiver wire is going to be an immediate upgrade to what they already have in this room. And the problem with the edge rusher group here in Carolina is just injuries. It's not just Amari Barno and DJ Wonnum being on PUP. It's also Tay Davis, who I guess he's a linebacker, but Tay Davis, he's injured. Cam Gill, outside linebacker, got a sack in that game on Saturday, immediately got injured. Someone I thought was going to make the team. You had three guys who I felt like if they're healthy, if they were healthy, like one of them, he's on a team for sure. Gill, I feel pretty good about that. Barno, probably, maybe not. I don't know. But that's not a good spot to be in where three edge rushers, and especially the guy that you paid first this offseason after trading Burns, aren't available to you for at least the first 4 weeks as Barno and Wonnum start the season on PUP. Then Gill is out for the year on IR, and same thing with Tay Davis. They waive Lucy Villon and Derek McClendon, look for both those guys to be back in the practice squad. They got to do something here. I just don't know realistically how much they can truly do to elevate what they have. They got to add somebody, got to do something just to do something. Just don't know if that something's going to turn to really anything of importance for this team and help them out down the road. Inside linebacker, Cap Force, Shaq Thompson, Josie Jewell, Clyde and Charles, Trevin Wallace. They waived Chandler Wooten, waived Aaron Beasley, the UDFA out of Tennessee. They could look to upgrade this group. Linebacker spot where they could look at the waiver wire, think that maybe someone is better for them than Claude and Charles. Obviously, Wallace is going nowhere. Same thing with Jewell and Thompson. But I think Charles played really well in the preseason. Same defensive coaching staff from last year that probably played a role in him being claimed off of waivers after he was cut by the Jets, and his special teams kind of player. And speaking of guys who are injured, like they lost Gill, they lost Tay Davis, Sam Franklin Jr. right now is not available. They need some of these special teams kind of aces to be on the roster still. So I feel like, famous last words, Claude Charles should be safe. Not saying he is. I feel like he should be safe. Looking at the secondary, kept 5 at corner, kept 5 at safety. No surprise there. J.C. Horn, Mike Jackson, Troy Hill, Deshaun Jameson, Chaw Smith, Wade. It was surprising to me that Deshaun Jameson, not DiCaprio Boodle, made the team. Quadre Mosley, Chris Wilcox also. They were waived. Injury reserve, designated for return. Dane Jackson, just discussed that earlier. I talked about yesterday that if Deshaun Jameson's going to make it, it's because they're going to take him because of special teams and having a returner. You already have David Moore right now. They already have Raheem Blackshear. They already have Amir Smith-Marset. Now, it's possible that they already know who they're going to get rid of once they're able to get somebody off of the waiver wire. And it's possible that David Moore, Raheem Blackshear, or not all of them, but Amir Smith-Marset could be one of those guys they're planning on getting rid of. They already have 4 returners. I didn't think he played better than DiCaprio Boodle during the preseason or in training camp. Had some pretty rough moments in camp. But he's still here now, and Boodle would think they would want to bring him back in the practice squad if they're able to do that. I feel like that's a guy that probably should get claimed by someone after his experience last year. We'll see how that works out. Safety, Xavier Woods, Jordan Fuller, Nick Scott, those 3 are going to be starters. And in a big nickel situation, Scott would be the big nickel. Jamie Robinson, Damani Richardson, those are the other 2. Rudy Ford was released. The injury reserve designated for return, Sam Franklin, and Alex Cook was cut. I was surprised to see this. Last year, Alex Cook was signed out the Giants practice squad here in Carolina after they're having some issues with Von Bell being injured, Xavier Woods being injured, and he started in 2 games and outplayed Jamie Robinson. I felt like this coaching staff preferred Alex Cook over Robinson. Alex Cook was great week 1 in the preseason. The last 2 games, and I think this kind of stands out to Dave Canales. He said, I'm going to evaluate these guys based on how they play in the preseason, and I didn't feel like he played that well the last 2 weeks. I did think Jamie Robinson actually was better. I just thought based off of the body of work from last year, the same defensive coaching staff being here, that Alex Cook would win today. Still possible that he could be signed to the practice squad. But right now, he's no longer here in Carolina. And Jamie Robinson, the 5th-round pick at FSU, is still here. Damani Richardson had an awesome week 2 weeks ago with the pick on Bryce and Jack Plummer getting the pick in that game against the Jets. He earned a roster spot. Good for him. Undrafted free agent out of Texas A&M. He's on the team. Special teams, Eddie Pinheiro, Johnny Hecker, J.J. Jansen. So really, the biggest surprise to me that they have 7 defensive linemen that they chose Deshaun Jameson over DiCaprio Boodle, even though maybe not that big of a surprise. One of those guys is going to make the team. Once they traded for Mike Jackson, that was going to cost either Deshaun or DiCaprio a spot on this roster. And I'm surprised that Jamie Robinson got the nod over Alex Cook. He was drafted. Politics of the NFL, possibly that's what led to him sticking here. I don't know, but that's what the Panthers decided to do. And now they look towards the waiver wire and trying to add some guys that can help the team. So we'll take a look at what positions the Panthers should address and possibly who they can go after. And there's one guy that helped the team win a Super Bowl 2 years ago that's available and plays wide receiver and special teams. And maybe the Panthers will be interested. Should they be? I don't know. Will they be? Maybe. We'll talk about that in just a moment here on Locked On Panthers. The Panthers are down to 53 men, and that will be how the roster stays throughout the rest of the season. They will add players to the practice squad. They will also be very active when it comes to placing waiver claims. The one benefit to being the worst team in the NFL last season is that for the first 4 weeks of the year, they get top priority in who they want to bring off of waivers. And this is a big time to do it, as all the teams in the NFL had to cut their rosters down from 90 to 53 men by 4 p.m. on Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. Now, the waiver deadline is at noon on Wednesday. Looking back to last year on Panthers.com, Darren Gant, my good buddy, had an article around 2:06 p.m. that same afternoon of the waiver wire deadline, telling all of us who the Panthers were able to claim off of waivers. Maybe this year we'll know earlier, as the Panthers have the top priority. They actually just put out a release and they just tell you who every team got. So probably won't be any earlier. Maybe it will be. Either way, around 2 p.m. is when we should find out on Wednesday who the Panthers have claimed. And at some point in time, on Wednesday evening, I'll come back, maybe live. I don't know. We'll have a show and I'll react to all those changes. Looking at just this roster, wide receiver, as I said, with 7 guys, feels like that could be a spot where they decide they're going to drop either ISM or David Moore. Looking at offensive line, Andrew Rame, how secure is he? Cade Mays also. If Rame is someone who they've decided to keep, and Cade Mays is injured right now, battling his way back at least, is that someone who they decide to let go of instead? Running back, I think they're probably solid there. Not going to do anything at quarterback. Defensive line, with Crumedy could go to IR. That would open up a spot for the Panthers to claim somebody, not have to get rid of somebody. Jaden Peavy, he could be potentially on the hook. Eku Leota, they bring in an outside linebacker. Clowney's good. Johnson's good. Caleb on Chason, they went out of their way to sign him during free agency. So I don't think that they're going to get rid of him. If anything, it would be Eku Leota, who then I think they would try to bring back off the waiver wire if he's still available. Linebacker, Claude Trellis would be the one. I think he should be fine. Corner, if they want to address it, Deshaun Jameson, it would be you, buddy. And then I guess Damani Richardson out of safety if they want to do that. But the safety room is pretty loaded. There were 7 guys I talked about that could all make the team. Cook, Ford didn't make it. And then Sam Franklin's injured right now. Like, that's 8 guys at safety that are all rosterable players. And they have only, of course, kept 5. I'm looking at it overall. Outside linebacker, we talked about this yesterday. This has got to be the spot the Panthers have to place a claim on. And I'm sure that Dan Morgan, the rest of the scouting staff, have looked around the league, watched tape along with the coaching staff, and they have identified who they want. I don't know who that player is, to be quite honest with you. I'm going to be as honest as possible. I don't know who they're going to be targeting. And looking around the league, it's going to be a bunch of younger guys off the waiver wire. There can be older players they want to bring in and hope that they can help them out. I just don't know when DJ Wenham's going to be available. And Dave said the other day that Amari Barno's not close. He's a long way away. That's not a good situation. I don't know how much better the situation really is going to get for this team over the next 24 hours or so as they place in a waiver claim and then they go to the free agent market and try to bring somebody else in. But they got to bring in, you think, at least 2 more guys. Just help out Clowney. Johnson's going to get his chance to start, I think, this year, especially week 1. Caleb on Chason, he's going to get an opportunity to show that he's not a bust. And Leota, we'll see if he sticks around. Hopefully at least the practice squad, but going to be tough if the Panthers are likely looking aggressively to get an outside linebacker, especially off of waivers. Wide receiver, Kadarius Toney's available. I'm not necessarily advocating for Kadarius Toney. I'm just not going to be surprised if the Panthers decide, yeah, that's our guy. Former first-round pick, and as we've seen, first-round picks, even if they have not been successful, Caleb on Jason's here, they always get another opportunity. Now, this would be opportunity number 3 for Kadarius Toney. And if the Chiefs don't want him, why should the Panthers want him? It's not like the Panthers are necessarily in a situation to stick their nose up at the thought of Kadarius Toney being on this offense. He does provide speed. He did make one of the biggest plays in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, and I think he made a play in the one this past February. It's been a while. Don't really remember much of the game other than Kansas City won again because, they have Mahomes. That's someone that would make sense. Add some more speed. He hasn't done really anything, though. He had worse numbers last year than Jonathan Mingo, so it's not like he's that attractive on paper and even just if you watched, but it's a possibility. That's someone the Panthers want to go after, and he's out there. He's probably the biggest name of wide receivers that are on the waiver wire, and the Panthers have top priority claim. So I would think outside linebacker, wide receiver could be a spot where they do that. Maybe they want to add another tight end. They like somebody who's out there. Corner, it feels like that. I mean, that could be a spot. But right now, with JC's healthy, knock on wood, of course, Mike Jackson, Troy Hill. Yeah, they could still probably use another veteran guy, someone who's more experienced than Deshaun Jameson to feel good about where they're at until Dane Jackson comes back. And here's the thing, too, like with Deshaun being on the team, that feels pretty temporary until Dane Jackson is healthy. He's going to be on the team. And then after that, he may be gone, depending on how things play out with the rest of that room and how he performs over the next couple of weeks, especially the first 4 weeks of the season and beyond. But again, y'all, Mike K, Charlotte Observer, does a great job, friend of the show. I know he's got something come out on guys he's looking at in particular. I took a glance at it and I was just going through these rosters. I'm like, I don't know. I saw Tony's name. That's a guy that potentially they're going to be interested in, whether that should be the case or not. I would say go check out his stuff. I want to be truthful and upfront and trying to point you in the best direction for just names. And I'm looking at all these, and it's just, they're just names to me. Like, who are these people? Like Willie Roberts from Seattle. Who is that? Okay. So the outside linebacker, we're looking there. Like positions, we all know which positions they should be. And it's clear that I think wide receiver, maybe one, tight end, possibly corner, defensive line is probably going to take away from. And maybe they add another inside linebacker. We'll see how it all plays out as waiver deadline at noon tomorrow. And then probably round 2, we'll find out who the Panthers were able to claim. And it could be a significant amount of players considering what we've seen in the past. They got 3 last year. Could be more than that this year. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where I will be back with you next Wednesday answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Julian Council and just give me those questions. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always, and forever keep pounding. And I'll talk to y'all on Wednesday evening and reacting to the Panthers roster moves, who's stayed, who's here. We'll get into all that on Wednesday here on the show.